What if I told you that, in London, there are streets where the price of a single home can reach levels that seem almost impossible to comprehend? Not the price of a mansion in a remote country estate, not an ancient castle hidden somewhere in the English countryside, but a private residence sitting behind an elegant facade, just a short walk from some of the most famous landmarks on Earth. In these parts of the city, location is not simply about being close to a good school or having a convenient commute. It is about belonging to a tiny geographic circle where history, power, privacy, and extraordinary wealth have been concentrated for generations. Behind quiet gates and immaculate rows of townhouses, some of London's most valuable properties have changed hands for sums that could purchase entire collections of luxury homes elsewhere. And the fascinating part is that the real value is often not visible from the street. A house may appear understated from the outside, yet behind its doors can be enormous living spaces, private gardens, underground garages, staff quarters, and interiors designed for people who rarely need to think about the cost of anything. But there is something even more intriguing about these addresses. The wealthiest buyers are not necessarily paying for the building itself. They are paying for the privilege of owning a tiny piece of London that almost nobody else can ever reproduce. To understand why these streets command such extraordinary prices, you have to look beyond the bricks and mortar. London's most prestigious neighborhoods were shaped over centuries, and their desirability grew alongside the British aristocracy, royal connections, international finance, and global commerce. A property in one of these districts can carry an invisible history that begins long before the current owner arrives. Some streets have been associated with aristocratic families, political figures, diplomats, artists, and international business leaders, creating a sense of prestige that becomes increasingly difficult to replicate as the city grows. There is also a simple economic reality. There are only so many historic streets in central London, and the supply of truly exceptional properties is incredibly limited. You can build another luxury apartment tower, but you cannot easily recreate a centuries-old neighborhood with the same architecture, position, reputation, and cultural significance. That scarcity transforms real estate into something closer to a collectible asset, and once a location becomes a symbol of status, the price begins to reflect not only what the property is worth today, but what the address itself represents. This is why two homes of similar size can have dramatically different values depending on which side of London's invisible social map they occupy. Yet the most surprising detail may be what happens when these properties are sold. Many of London's wealthiest homes never appear on the open market in the way ordinary houses do. Transactions can be discreet, private, and handled through specialist networks, where the identity of the buyer may be as carefully protected as the property itself. For ultra-wealthy individuals, privacy has become a luxury in its own right, and some of these streets offer something increasingly rare in modern cities: the ability to live at the heart of one of the world's busiest capitals while remaining almost completely invisible. You could walk past a multi-million-pound residence without realizing that one of the world's most powerful families, entrepreneurs, or investors lives just beyond the door. And this is where London's most expensive streets begin to reveal their true character. They are not simply places where houses cost more. They are carefully preserved worlds where history and modern wealth coexist behind walls, gates, and perfectly maintained facades. But if you think all of London's richest streets are defined by extravagant displays of money, the next neighborhood tells a very different story. Because in one of the most expensive parts of the city, the greatest luxury is often not being noticed at all. Walk through Mayfair today, and you might initially wonder what all the fuss is about. There are no enormous skyscrapers announcing the wealth of the neighborhood, no giant gates covered in gold, and no obvious signs telling you that you're standing in one of the most expensive pieces of real estate in Britain. Instead, you see elegant Georgian architecture, quiet streets, immaculate storefronts, luxury hotels, private clubs, and seemingly ordinary doors that conceal extraordinary interiors. This is precisely what makes Mayfair so fascinating. Its wealth is rarely loud. It is expressed through subtle details: the quality of the stonework, the names of the boutiques, the cars that disappear into private entrances, and the fact that some of the world's most expensive brands consider this small district a natural home. The neighborhood sits in the heart of London, close to Hyde Park and the West End, Yet it has maintained an atmosphere of exclusivity that feels almost detached from the frantic energy surrounding it. For centuries, Mayfair has attracted aristocrats, financiers, celebrities, diplomats, and international billionaires. And that long association with elite society has created a reputation that continues to reinforce itself. The more prestigious the address becomes, the more desirable it is to those who can afford it, and the more exclusive it becomes for everyone else. But Mayfair's story becomes even more interesting when you realize that some of its most valuable streets are not famous because of a single spectacular mansion. Their power comes from the concentration of wealth within a remarkably small area. Streets such as Grosvenor Square and Park Lane have long been associated with some of the city's most prestigious residences, while nearby streets contain properties that can command extraordinary prices despite their relatively modest appearance from the outside. In Mayfair, the value of a property can be influenced by something as simple as its exact position, its orientation, its historical importance, and even the privacy it provides. A townhouse overlooking a quiet garden or a prestigious square can become significantly more desirable than a larger property elsewhere. And then there is the neighborhood itself. Imagine being able to step outside your front door and reach some of the world's finest restaurants, exclusive boutiques, five-star hotels, auction houses, galleries, and private members clubs within minutes. For someone with almost unlimited resources, convenience becomes another form of luxury. The wealthy do not necessarily want to travel across London to find what they need. In Mayfair, much of the world they want is already concentrated around them. Yet beneath this polished surface lies a curious paradox. Mayfair is one of the most expensive neighborhoods in London, but it is not always one of the busiest places to live. Some properties are used as second homes, investment assets, diplomatic residences, or private retreats for international owners who may spend only part of the year in the city. This can make certain streets feel unusually quiet, especially when compared with the enormous economic value concentrated behind their doors. And that contrast tells us something important about the modern luxury property market. For the ultra-wealthy, buying a home in Mayfair may not be primarily about needing somewhere to live. It can be about security, prestige, wealth preservation, and access to a global city. Owning property here can be a statement that requires no explanation. But Mayfair is only one part of London's extraordinary real estate hierarchy. Just a short distance away are neighborhoods where aristocratic history, royal connections, and some of the city's most recognizable luxury landmarks come together. And when you enter those streets, you discover that London's most expensive addresses are not all competing to be the most glamorous. Some are competing for something far more valuable, the right to be considered untouchable. Just a short distance from Mayfair, the atmosphere begins to change. The streets become quieter, the architecture more residential, and the sense of exclusivity even more pronounced. Welcome to Knightsbridge and Belgravia, two of the most prestigious neighborhoods in London, where wealth is woven into the fabric of the streets themselves. This is the part of the city where you can find some of the world's most famous luxury shopping destinations, yet the most valuable properties are often tucked away from the crowds. Knightsbridge is internationally recognized for its proximity to Harrods and its spectacular luxury retail scene. But behind that glamorous public face lies an extraordinary residential market. Belgravia, meanwhile, feels almost like a private village hidden in the center of one of the world's busiest capitals. Its immaculate white stucco terraces, quiet garden squares, and historic townhouses have attracted generations of aristocratic families and some of the world's wealthiest residents. Streets such as Eaton Square and Cadogan Square have become symbols of old-world prestige, where owning a home is about far more than having a luxurious place to live. It is about acquiring an address that has been considered exceptional for generations. And in a city where reputation can take centuries to build, that kind of history is almost impossible to purchase overnight. The remarkable thing about Belgravia is how deliberately its identity was created. The neighborhood was developed in the 19th century by the Grosvenor family, one of Britain's most influential aristocratic families, and its elegant architecture was designed to attract people of wealth and status. The result was not simply a collection of beautiful homes, but an entire environment built around exclusivity. Garden squares provided green spaces for residents, while the uniform architecture created an unmistakable visual identity that still survives today. Even now, many properties maintain the distinctive white facades and grand proportions that made the area famous. But there is another layer to the story. The most valuable properties in these neighborhoods can be extraordinarily difficult to obtain because ownership is often tightly controlled by a combination of scarcity, privacy, and long-term wealth. When a truly exceptional townhouse becomes available, it may attract interest from international buyers who are not simply looking for a home, but for a permanent base in one of the world's most influential cities. Some buyers may be attracted by London's political and financial importance, others by its cultural institutions, and some simply want the prestige of an address that instantly communicates status. The result is a market where demand can remain intense even when the number of available properties is extremely small. And this is where the phrase, "money can't easily buy," becomes especially relevant. Having enormous wealth may give you the financial ability to make an offer, but it does not guarantee that the right property will ever become available. A particular townhouse might remain in the same family for decades, sometimes generations, while another may be protected by historic restrictions or architectural requirements that limit what can be changed. In other words, the true luxury is not merely owning a beautiful house. It is finding one at precisely the right moment and convincing the owner to let it go. This creates an almost mythical quality around the most desirable addresses in Knightsbridge and Belgravia. Some buyers may wait years for the opportunity to acquire a particular property, knowing that another chance might not come for a very long time. And when a home finally changes hands, the transaction can become a quiet event in the world of global wealth, barely noticed by the public, but closely watched by those who understand the significance of the address. Yet these neighborhoods raise a fascinating question. How did London become a city where ordinary-looking streets could accumulate such extraordinary value? To answer that, we have to travel back through centuries of history and discover how Britain's capital transformed a collection of neighborhoods into one of the world's most powerful real estate markets. The story of London's most expensive streets did not begin with modern billionaires, luxury cars, or international property investors. It began much earlier, when London was expanding beyond the medieval core, and wealthy families began searching for cleaner, quieter, and more fashionable places to live. As the city grew, new districts emerged with carefully planned squares, elegant terraces, and grand residences designed to attract Britain's aristocracy and political elite. Over time, these neighborhoods became more than fashionable places to live. They became physical representations of social status. The address on your envelope could tell people something about who you were, who you knew, and where you belonged. This was particularly important in a society where social hierarchy played a powerful role in everyday life. The grand houses of Mayfair, Belgravia, and surrounding districts were built to reflect that hierarchy, with spacious interiors, impressive facades, and carefully designed streets that created a sense of order and prestige. What began as an urban development strategy eventually became one of the most valuable concentrations of real estate on the planet. The extraordinary irony is that the streets that were once designed for Britain's aristocracy would eventually become magnets for global wealth from almost every corner of the world. As the British Empire expanded and London became an international center of finance, politics, culture, and commerce, the city's most prestigious neighborhoods gained a new kind of importance. Wealthy residents were no longer coming only from Britain. International families, entrepreneurs, diplomats, investors, and business leaders increasingly wanted a presence in the capital. London offered something few other cities could match, a combination of history, political influence, financial infrastructure, cultural prestige, and global connectivity. Owning property in the right neighborhood could therefore serve multiple purposes at once. It could be a residence, an investment, a secure store of wealth, or simply a strategic base in one of the world's most influential cities. As international money flowed into the London property market, the scarcity of historic homes in central locations became even more significant. The city could continue to grow, but the number of original 19th century townhouses surrounding its most prestigious garden squares could not. Every time one of these properties was purchased, another piece of a finite collection disappeared from the market. That scarcity created a powerful feedback loop. The fewer exceptional homes available, the more valuable the remaining ones became. And the more valuable they became, the more their addresses turned into symbols of global status. But there is a deeper reason why these streets continue to fascinate people. London's most expensive properties represent the collision of two completely different worlds. On one side is the ancient city, with its centuries-old architecture, aristocratic traditions, historic squares, and carefully preserved facades. On the other is the modern world of global finance, technology entrepreneurs, international investors, and newly created fortunes searching for the most exclusive places to establish themselves. These two worlds meet every day on streets that may look remarkably unchanged from the outside. A historic townhouse can now be owned by someone whose wealth was created thousands of miles away, while a building that once belonged to an aristocratic family may become part of an international investment portfolio. And yet, the streets themselves remain almost frozen in time. That contrast is perhaps the greatest secret behind London's most expensive addresses. They offer something that money struggles to recreate elsewhere. They allow modern wealth to step inside a world that already existed long before it arrived. But there is still one final question left to answer. What is it exactly that makes these streets so valuable? And why do the world's wealthiest people continue to compete for them, even when the price seems almost impossible to justify? Perhaps the greatest secret behind London's most expensive streets is that their value has almost nothing to do with the number of bedrooms, the size of the kitchen, or even the luxury of the interior. The true value lies in something far more difficult to manufacture: permanence. In a world where cities constantly change, buildings are demolished, neighborhoods are redesigned, and fortunes can appear almost overnight, London's most prestigious streets offer a sense of continuity that is incredibly rare. A townhouse in Belgravia, a residence overlooking one of Mayfair's historic squares, or an elegant property near Hyde Park is connected to a story that began generations ago. The architecture carries the memory of another London, while the address remains relevant to the people shaping the modern world. That combination is extraordinarily powerful. A billionaire can build a spectacular home almost anywhere, but they cannot simply create a centuries-old neighborhood with an established reputation, protected architecture, cultural significance, and proximity to the heart of one of the world's most influential capitals. This is why the wealthiest buyers are often willing to pay enormous sums for properties that, on paper, may not appear dramatically different from luxury homes in other cities. They are not just buying square footage, they are buying rarity, history, privacy, and the prestige of belonging to a very small geographical circle. But there is another secret hiding in plain sight. The most expensive streets in London are valuable precisely because they do not need to constantly prove how wealthy they are. Their power comes from subtlety. The quiet facades, private gardens, discreet entrances, and absence of excessive displays create an environment where status is understood rather than announced. In many ways, this is the ultimate expression of luxury. The person walking past a beautiful townhouse may have no idea who owns it, how much it is worth, or what lies behind the door, and that anonymity can itself be priceless. For individuals who live under constant public attention or operate at the highest levels of international business, politics, entertainment, and finance, the ability to disappear into an elegant neighborhood becomes a form of privilege. This is why streets like those in Mayfair, Belgravia, and Knightsbridge have remained desirable despite enormous changes in the world around them. Their greatest asset is not simply what they offer, but what they protect. They create a private world in the middle of a global city, where the outside world can be only a few steps away, while still feeling remarkably distant. And perhaps that is the ultimate answer to why London's most expensive streets command such extraordinary prices. The richest buyers are not competing simply for houses. They are competing for access to a finite piece of history that becomes more difficult to obtain with every passing year. There will always be new luxury developments, taller towers, smarter homes, and more technologically advanced residences. But there will never be another original Mayfair, another historic Belgravia, or another London shaped by centuries of aristocracy, commerce, culture, and global influence. The streets themselves have become the luxury, and that is why, behind the elegant doors and quiet facades, you find a world where a property's true price is determined by something far more powerful than bricks and mortar. The simple fact that there is only one place in the world quite like it. So the next time you walk through one of these seemingly ordinary London streets, remember this. Behind the walls may be one of the most valuable commodities on earth, not because it is the biggest, newest, or most extravagant, but because it is something money can never truly create from scratch, a place with a history that cannot be replicated.